Happy Wednesday, everyone, and welcome to Sports Scene. I'm Nicole Shearin, and we start today with some big news from the USC men's basketball program. Head coach Andy Enfield has received a contract extension through the 2027 to 2028 season, keeping the 9-year head coach with the Trojans for at least the next 5 seasons. Enfield has already compiled an impressive resume at USC. He has an overall record of 182 and 116. His team's 72 wins in the last 3 years are the third most in the Power 6. The Trojans' 25 regular season wins this year are a program record. Enfield issued the following statement in a USC Athletics press release. "I am so proud of the success of our players have had on the court and academically. My family and I are very happy to be a part of the Trojan family. I feel great about the future of USC basketball in the Pac-12 and nationally." USC Athletic Director Mike Bohn said, quote, "Andy has continued to meet and exceed every expectation we have set for him. The national landscape of college basketball has taken notice. Andy's incredible accomplishments stand on their own." I'm joined in the studio today by Sam Reno and James Lee. So guys, let's just get right into it. James, what do you make of Andy Enfield's contract extension?
Well, I think Coach Andy Enfield is well deserved for this contract extension. Here's why I think so. He has been at USC for 9 seasons and has turned the program into a constant winner. And also, he's a player's coach. He cares more about the players themselves than the game itself. So he's the type of coach that every player wants to work with.
I mean, the wins are nice. The regular season wins are great, and all these 21 seasons that we're stacking up here. But ultimately, we play to win championships, and I've yet to see one out here despite all these 20-win seasons. The only title we've brought home since Andy Enfield has taken over the job was the Paycom Wood Legacy in Anaheim earlier this year. You know what they do at UCLA? They hang championship banners. At Oregon, they win conference titles. They make Final Fours. We've yet to see any of that here, and so this extension is kind of long. It's a lot of money. It's sort of, there's not enough pressure on this program for a program that's not turning the results necessarily that you should be seeing if you're going to bring in the recruiting classes that Enfield has the last couple of years. I'd like to see that trophy cabinet actually have something in it.
Well, it's certainly big news for USC's head coach, and it comes in the middle of a big week for this program. The Trojans will start Pac-12 tournament play as the number 3 seed in tomorrow's quarterfinal against either Washington or Utah. But first, let's send it to Eli to follow up last week's incredible bracket for the women's tournament with his picks for the men's side.
Last week for the women's bracket, I missed just one game picking at Oregon, let us down in the semifinal. Hopefully they won't do it again this week. We're going to get a perfect bracket this time. It's time for the bracket breakdown presented by Nathan Ackerman. Let's get it started. Game 1 is already underway. Arizona State and Stanford. They're at halftime. Arizona State has a 4-point lead. I like the Sun Devils to head to the quarterfinal to play their rival. In game number 2, I got Oregon. They let us down last week. They're not going to let us down this time. Down here, I like Cal. The kids from Berkeley, led by Jordan Shepard, to upset Washington State, and I like UW to get the win over Utah. Utah, a young team, inexperienced first-year head coach. They still have room to improve. In the quarterfinals, anything can happen in a rivalry game. I like the Sun Devils to take down the number 1 seed Arizona Wildcats. Arizona's a top team in the country, but they're going to get bettered by their rival. And I like Oregon to go to the semifinal. They always turn it on late. They're going to turn it on again here in the tournament. And in the bottom half of the bracket, 2 teams with the bye, UCLA and USC. They will face for the 3rd time this season in another edition of the Crosstown Showdown semifinals. I like Arizona State to head all the way to the final, 1 win away from getting the automatic berth they need to reach the NCAA tournament under Bobby Hurley. And I like the Bruins, not the Trojans this time, to get the win in Vegas. And then for the final, I like UCLA to win it all. Mick Cronin is leading this team. They're red hot as of late. Johnny Juzang, Jaime Jaquez Jr., who's putting up incredible numbers over the last week, will win the Pac-12 tournament title. They're going to head into the NCAA tournament red hot, looking to make back-to-back Final Four appearances.
Thanks, Eli. Now, let's toss it to Sam. What are your guys' takeaways about USC's side of the bracket this week in Vegas?
I mean, if you look just immediately in that quarterfinal matchup, I think they actually made out pretty well in the four teams in that pool that they could have gotten. They struggled with Washington State, they struggled with Cal, and you avoid both of them, and they've had a relatively easy time with Washington and Utah, who they will face. But if we're all looking ahead to that crosstown showdown in Vegas, the 2 versus 3 matchup in the semifinal, and as much recent success as USC has had against UCLA, it's tough to see them getting by in a tight March game. Sure, both teams have depth of scoring, 4 players averaging double digits on each side. But if you go through a list of who you trust to get a bucket late in games, I'm almost picking all 4 of those guys for UCLA, in Jaquez, in Bernard, in Campbell. Maybe Boogie Ellis, and that's it. But you just can't trust these USC players with the ball in their hands to get buckets in tight games. We've seen it against Arizona down in Tucson. We saw it last week in Westwood. That's why I think I have to go with the UCLA team in that matchup.
Yeah, I think USC will take down UCLA in the semifinals of the Pac-12 tournament, but fall short to Arizona in the finals. Here's why I think so. So USC went 1-1 against their crosstown rivalry this season, and in the first game, they won the game without their best player, Isaiah Mobley, and without Boogie Ellis scoring, which is pretty impressive. And in the second game, it was really close the entire game. And if USC can execute better in the defensive end and adding more pressure to the ball movement and forcing more turnovers, they have a pretty good chance to win the semifinals, I think.
See, guys, when the Trojans and the Bruins face off on Friday, if they obviously get to that point, I'm extremely skeptical, okay? This team is one word, and it's inconsistent. You never know which Trojan team is going to show up. One game they're on fire, and then the next game, well, it's kind of a flop. The reason they fell on Saturday, what was the reason for that? Turnovers. USC had 15 compared to 1 for UCLA. Now that's inexcusable. You cannot win games when you're practically giving the ball away. 7 steals for UCLA compared to 0 for USC. Oh, and not to mention, like you said, Sam, UCLA has monsters on the court. Jaquez Jr. has been absolutely on fire this season. 30 points against Washington, turns around and has 27 against USC. He's unstoppable in the paint, and the Trojans have struggled defending those players in the paint. Now, the reason why I think this could be a potential win for the Trojans, it's an almost equal matchup like when we saw on Saturday. Rebounds, pretty much identical, 30 each. Field goal percentage, well, practically the same. An assist, each team had 15 each. So if the right Trojan team shows up on Friday, they're giving the Bruins a run for their money. But if they don't, it's Bruins in the bag.
Yeah, we can bring all the stats and all the recent context into this as we want, but at the end of the day, it's a rivalry game, and you got to throw all that out the window.
Exactly. And it will certainly be an interesting week in Sin City for the Trojans. Right now, the team is projected to earn a 6th seed in March Madness, but that could very well change depending on their Pac-12 tournament success. So, James, who are some of the X factors that will help USC make a deep conference tournament run and end up in that March Madness seed?
Well, talking about X factors, I think Isaiah Mobley and Chavez Goodwin are the biggest X factors for USC, averaging 25.9 points and 14.9 rebounds per game. They are definitely one of the best big duos in the Pac-12 tournament. However, Chavez have some problems. He gets into foul trouble early in the game, sometimes against good teams like UCLA and Arizona. And also, Isaiah Mobley disappears sometimes in the first half of the game. It seems like he tries to get his teammates more involved in the offense, but he forgets about his individual offense. Playing against great teams like UCLA and Arizona, we need him to stay aggressive the entire game.
There is one player who is the X factor for this Trojan squad, and it's Drew Peterson. We saw against UCLA at the Galen Center, he had probably one of the best games of his entire life. 27 points, 12 rebounds, and well, what happened, guys? The Trojans secured the win that game. They then roll up to Eugene, and Peterson becomes the X factor once again. Secures the 3-point shot with 14 seconds left, and a defensive stop to bring home the win against the Ducks. He's 3rd in the Pac-12 in his 3-point percentage. So when he's hot, he's unstoppable. And when he's not, well, then it kind of all goes downhill. But the Trojans need the dominant Drew Peterson to show up in Vegas if they want to ride this tournament all the way to the championship.
Yeah, sure, Drew Peterson was incredible in that February matchup against UCLA, but it's hard for me to believe your X factor can be a guy who dribbled the ball off his foot not once, but twice in potential game-tying possessions this season. And that's why your X factor is Boogie Ellis. 8 times this season, he scored 16 or more points, and they've won 7 of those games. And the game they didn't was that weird Oregon game in January where there were no fans and Oregon were setting career highs and not missing any shots. I'm willing to throw that one out. And your X factor has to be willing to refuse to let your team lose. And when Boogie's on, USC just is not. He's going to get to his spots. He's going to hit his shots regardless of how many defenders are on him. And we saw that against Washington State. He demanded the ball back from, yep, you guessed it, Drew Peterson, took it back, got to his spot, hit the shot, and USC at that point still stayed alive in the Pac-12 title race.
Well, it should be very interesting to see how it all goes down in Sin City this weekend. But that's going to do it for Sports Scene today. Thanks everyone for tuning in. For Sam Reno and James Lee, I'm Nicole Shearin. See you after spring break.